Today we're going to can about 55 pounds of meat. Total cost was about $150. So rather than bore you with all the actions that had to come into this, it took me about 3 hours to get to where I am now. So what I have is 55 pounds of meat. I have pork loin, which is in the back, and I have that both in cubes and in flats. Now, some of these I browned first because I kind of like the flavor, and over here the pork loin I browned. And then I have round steak here. I've got some in steak size, and then I have some in cubes, and then over here I have chuck roast, and that's all in cubes. Back on this end I have 20 pounds of hamburger, which I browned, and while I was browning that I ended up getting this much tallow. Oops, looks like I melted my containers. And so as you'll see on the top one, there's only about a ½ inch of actual good tallow, and on the bottom one it's completely clear. And then I also canned some kielbasa, both in whole and in cubes. Now what we do from this point is we add our salt, which I have done on all of them except for the last row. In the quarts I use 1½ teaspoons, and in the pints I use 1 teaspoon. Now, when you're canning raw meat, you don't add any water. But when you're canning cooked meat, you see I've added water up to the top of these. And then once you're done adding the water, you take your flat tool and you run it along the sides. And the reason you're doing that is to get any of the air bubbles out, so that when you process this, you don't end up with no water. At this point, the next step is we take and we wipe the jar lids. Now, when you're doing a large amount like this, then you need to use a wet one to clean the rims, unless you're cleaning the rims as you go, and then you go back through with a dry paper towel. And so that's where we're at. Now we've got them all ready. Now on the stove here I have my 2 pressure canners. I've got my large one for my quarts and my small one for my pints, because you don't want to process them together, because the pints only take 75 minutes and the quarts take 90 minutes. But behind here I have my lids. And my lids have been seeping in water for the whole time. So at this point, what we do is we just simply take our magnet with our lid on it, and we plop it on. Sometimes easier said than done when you got a magnet. You're only using the magnet because they're hot. And then you take a jar lid, which I have a bunch of these. Am I making you dizzy yet? And you screw it on. Once that's screwed on, and I'm going to do it with 2 hands so it's hand tight, you put it in your water bath. From this point, we take the jar and we put it in. Take another lid, and they aren't that hot if you've got tough hands. Screw it on, put it in. Now I've had this pots on with the water heating up for quite a while now. And we put it in. I like to use the wide mouth jars because they're much easier to load, but this time of year it's really hard to find the wide mouth jars. As a matter of fact, it's very hard to find any jars whatsoever. So you kind of got to just figure out the best way you can do it and what can fit in what jar. I ended up going to 4 stores to get 6 cases of canning jars so that I could get this done. And I felt it was very important to get it done now, because the prices of food are going up dramatically. Now, I am not staying here in SHTF situation. I have enough food here for approximately 3 months. And what the plan is to do, when it comes time to bug out, I will distribute the food that is left here at the home to my neighbors. I just think that's the right thing to do. So it gives them an opportunity, and it also prevents them from wanting to come into my home and break into it to see what I have. So this one here is a double-decker. I just recently purchased it because when you have to sit for 90 minutes and watch these things and then sit for another 90 minutes and then another 90 minutes, it gets really tiring. So I wanted to just get it all done at once. Which won't be at once. I'll have to do a couple batches. Now remember, the reason you're putting salt in your jars is not because what you've got in there needs salt. If you process these, what happens is all the flavoring from inside whatever you're processing leaches into the water. And so if you don't add salt to the water, then all the flavoring leaches into the water and you have nothing left in your meat. And so you really don't want to do that. Just add a little bit of salt and it will stop that from happening. I do brown my ground beef, because if you don't brown your ground beef, it clumps like a like meatloaf. But if you brown it, it stays like ground beef. Once you get to this point, you put your lids on. Really simple. There's an arrow here, and what I've done is I put black marker on here so that I don't have to try to hunt for it. And then you take your other lid, and there's also an arrow set on it, on the handle. It tells you where to line it up. Take your little toppers off, and then you're going to go ahead and bring it up to pressure. Once it's up to pressure, you're going to let it vent for 7 to 10 minutes, and then you'll start your timer